Welcome back to another episode of Speak Out. I am your host, Christine Yeargin, and today's episode did not go as planned. But I say that, it went even better. We have a guest on. When I have these guests on, I do a lot of research and I have to figure out what questions I'm going to ask them. I have an idea of kind of what I want to talk about, but then you have to dive into them a little bit deeper, make sure you're asking the right questions, make sure you know things that might help set up another question. There's a lot of research that goes into the behind the scenes of it. And so I did all of this research, and the show just takes a total detour and starts talking about something else, but it's amazing. And it was totally a God thing. We have on today Kaya Jones, who is a former member of the Pussycat Dolls. And now she is somebody who is still in the music industry and still sings, but now she does it for the glory of God. And she's kind of sharing her path to stardom and to fame and what she went through and some of the control that happens in Hollywood, and peels back the layers. And she became so vulnerable in today's episode that I was completely unexpected. I had no idea some of the things that she shared. I had no idea that she was going to share them, let alone that it was going to be the first time she's ever shared it publicly on a camera with us, with this audience. She wanted you guys to hear this first. So I think it's an important episode. We're talking about that vulnerable aspect of her life. I don't want to give too much away here, but we also talk about Hollywood and how it is kind of taboo to speak up for your beliefs, to speak out for your beliefs, and how they kind of control every aspect of you and over-sexualize you and push you to be somebody that you don't necessarily want to be if you want to succeed. So today's episode is really, really special. I think it was, again, just such a God thing, the way that she opened up for us, and I'm really excited to hear what you think. Please share in the comments. Let me know. Like this episode. I never do that on these intro things, but I'm going to start doing it now. Like this episode, leave a comment, tell us what you think. Go give Kaya some love and follow her. I think you're really going to enjoy her, and she's such an inspiration. But here we go. I'm excited for you here. I want to talk about you, and if anybody is listening, that obviously beforehand, the part that we're editing out, we did talk about somebody who is near and dear, and I do want to share very briefly about that because Kaya is so sweet and so special to have helped me with a fundraiser that we did for our dear friend Zoe. And our friend passed away in February, and she has a little girl, and we did a fundraiser for her as a $1 challenge, and we ended up raising $10,000. And of course, $10,000 isn't necessarily life-changing, but it did help in that time frame because there were expenses that were happening that should have come from somewhere else but didn't. So we kind of helped out with that, and I get to keep in touch with Zoe's daughter, and Kaya was so great to share it on her social media. But Kaya, I want you to share for anybody listening. You were a member of the Pussycat Dolls.
Yes.
A very large band that was huge in the music industry.
Yes.
And that was kind of your skyrocket to fame.
Yes.
How did you get involved? Give us a little bit of your background, maybe for anybody who doesn't know you, a little bit of your background, and then kind of how you got involved in the Pussycat Dolls.
So my background consisted of, I knew I wanted to be in music. I immediately started auditioning around the age of 12 years old. I was signed to Universal Music Group at that age. Discovered by R. Kelly. No, there was never anything inappropriate with him. I know a lot of people want.
Everybody asked you that?
Yeah, no. I mean, if the question's been asked, no. He was actually like a military drill sergeant. That's why hearing about this stuff from him has really been hard for me to hear. I definitely want to reach out to him prayer-wise because I think something else is going on. So I'd like to pray for him ultimately.
Sure.
Nothing funny. So I was discovered by him at 12, was under his intense, drill sergeant ways for 2.5 years, and then was under a development deal with Capitol Records. And that was for more punk rock. So Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols came in. That's really how Kaya Jones was born, because my real name is Crystal. And Kaya Jones was born because we were coming out of the deal with R. Kelly. We needed to change my name musically to get the new deal with Capitol. Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols came in, said, hey, you know, put Jones at the end of your name. Tell everyone you're my daughter. You're doing punk rock music. It would be a cool vibe. I thought, hey, you can say a Sex Pistol, name them. I took the name. Kai Jones was then born essentially as an entity. And then at 17, that's when I auditioned for the Pussycat Dolls. And at that point,
So is that what happened? You just told people that you were his daughter? Like,
well,
that's
that
a
was
real
what
thing?
he thought. The record companies come up with all these interesting things. I mean, I think it's part of entertainment, you know, creating stories, you know what I mean, that could be interesting.
Yeah.
They thought, what a way to create a story. And yeah, that was kind of what they were going with, and we went with that. And but that journey, you know, again, another journey around rock and rollers. Still nothing funny I ever dealt with. I never dealt with anything inappropriate. I never dealt with any drug influences. I never dealt with any advances. I could hold my own. And what I did learn was how to work with professional musicians. And really what that was about was showing your chops. What can you do? Can you sing? Can you write? Can you play an instrument? So, you know, when you're in a room with guys like Josh Freese from Perfect Circle, and you know, Mike Dimkish from, you know, or Michael Ward from, Mike Dimkish was from The Cure, and then you have Mike Dimkish that's from oh gosh, One Headlight, you know, why am I blanking on the name? They wrote One Headlight. I don't know if you remember that song, but it was a big song.
No, I know the song, but I
Yeah,
am the absolute.
but the Wallflowers, sorry. So the Wallflowers.
Yes.
So, you know, you're working with guys that are really, really talented, and you've got to show, and you know, they're coming off tour with the Rolling Stones and major groups. So I never had anything funny. I never dealt with anything funny, but I could hold my own. And I think that's probably where my edginess comes from, because I am very edgy. I tend to, that is definitely something that was ingrained in me when I was young, you know, because that was my first start of understanding that because punk rock music really is about what you're saying. It really has nothing to do with how pretty you sound. It's more about what you're standing up for. And maybe that's part of what's still in me, that angst in me that stands up for, you know, human rights, or, you know, babies' rights, or any of that stuff. For sure, punk rock music gave me that foundation of being a bit of a brat and knowing that I can stand up and use my voice for something that counts. So by the time then, now 17 years old, that development deal ended, and I go into this audition for the Pussycat Dolls, I knew kind of the lay of the land in the music industry. I wasn't super seasoned, but I was more seasoned than most. I had had a good 5 years of being in this profession. And that's probably why it was a very hard audition. If you made the cut and you made it through, you were very good at what you did. But that's probably
How many people were in the audition?
Pardon?
How many people were in the audition?
So my audition consists of 2,000 girls. Out of the 2,000 girls, day one, they narrowed us down from 2,000 girls to 200 girls to 40 to 20 day one. The first 2,000 to 200 were narrowed down just on their dancing capabilities alone, which of course for me, I'm more of a singer dancer than a dancer singer. So I was like, oh, I was so nervous, because I'm like, I'm more of a singer, and if I can't
Not your focus. Yeah.
yeah. So I was a bit scared, but I made the cut down to the top 20, and then they gave us 2 sheets of paper. On the sheets of paper were like all the top singers and songs. And so they said, go home, rehearse. Well, I didn't have any. Literally, my ride drove me from Las Vegas, my home state, dropped me off. I had nowhere to stay. I had nowhere to stay. I literally was gonna sleep on the stoop outside. That was my plan, because I had nowhere to stay. My phone had died. I had friends in California, but I wasn't currently residing in California. And the lady who was actually, she was in the audition room. She was the editor-in-chief of Allure magazine. She was in the room, and also Jane magazine at the time, and I'll never forget it. She was driving out, and she said, sweetheart, do you need a ride? And I was like, it was like 9 p.m. at night, and I was like, yes. And I hopped in the car with her, and she gave me a ride to the Standard Hotel. I was too embarrassed to tell her I didn't have anywhere to go. And
Mm,
so I just said, I'm staying at the Standard Hotel because I knew that they had phones there in the lobby, and I'd be
mhm.
able to call a friend. And I was able to call my friend Catherine, who picked me up and let me stay at her home and brought me back for the second day of auditions, because I didn't know it was going to be multiple days. I just thought maybe one day one they're just going to figure out who. And then
Yeah.
I didn't have a plan. There was no plan for sure. Um, and during that ride, that awesome woman, that editor in chief, she said, you're so talented, whether you stay with this or not. By the way, they really like you. You've made it to the top 20. Like, I'm letting you know, it's between you and this other girl, Melody Thornton. And actually, we both joined the group, so it's really cute.
Wow.
Yeah, that was cool. But I went the next day with the 2 sheets of paper. You had to pick a song from the sheets of paper that you were going to do that day. And I decided to go with, from my years of training with R. Kelly, because R. Kelly was very much a stickler about music. He had produced Celine Dion, and he always said, because I sang Celine when I got signed to him, and he always said, that was the reason why he signed me, because nobody picks Celine Dion to sing. Like, she's so good and she's so hard, right? And so, and usually if you're going to pick something that hard, you're either going to come pretty close or be about par. So of
Mhm.
course I picked Celine Dion, My Heart Will Go On, because I knew none of the girls in that audition were going to do it. And I would probably, just by sheer trying to tackle someone so good on the vocal level, would get their attention and stick in their mind.
Impressive.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and that worked, because none of the other girls did it. They all did the same ones. They did Mariah Carey, they did Whitney Houston, they did Christina Aguilera, they did Britney Spears, they did Pink. They did not touch the Celine Dion song, and so it worked for me in the end. They narrowed it down at that point to 3 girls, to which then they had another audition with 3,000 girls, narrowed that down to 2. And then Nicole came in the last final audition. And then from there, out of those 6, we were narrowed down to the top 3. And so in total, there were over 5,000 women that auditioned for the group.
Holy smokes. That's insane. I can't even like fathom that many people and then being narrowed down. That must have been such a cool experience for somebody who you just get dropped off for the day, but you keep making these cuts. And I feel like Hollywood all the time, whether it's the fashion industry or music or acting,
Yeah.
but you kind of like go with the flow. They switch the auditions up on you and like, oh, hey, here's another day. And then you got to figure it out. And you're like, crap, I wasn't planning on this. I have a job that I have to get to. So they always kind of like just go on their schedule, not everybody else's.
Yep.
Um, but how cool of an experience to go from that many to be whittled down. That's a testament to your talent and how great that you are. There was something that you said, that's your rise to the Pussycat Dolls. And obviously, once you kind of got in, there have been some things that you've opened up about
Yeah.
and were maybe a little bit uncomfortable. One of the quotes that you said was, we're just going to go right into it because I found it so interesting, and it kind of shows a time where we are in society as a whole, where it's an over-sexualized society.
Yeah.
But one of the things you mentioned about being in the Pussycat Dolls was that it wasn't necessarily a girl group, but it felt more like a prostitution ring.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious to hear you kind of explain that to us.
Well, and I think Britney Spears also has said this very eloquently, and it's hard to say this because it's not something that makes us look good. It doesn't frame the person speaking on this issue correctly. But Britney Spears also said that she felt like someone being trafficked. That's a very heavy statement, because that's a very real issue in the world today. What does being trafficked feel like? What does being prostituted feel like? It feels like you're a slave, literally, to your dream, and the powers that be are holding the keys to the kingdom. You have no access to personal thoughts, space, choices, decisions. You are a owned commodity. You're not allowed to think for yourself, feel for yourself, date for yourself, want for yourself. What you eat has been decided for you. Where you live is going to be decided for you. Who your friends are is decided for you. Who you date, ultimately, you can't have a child. I mean, they're like, the level of control is to a point of like, who am I? Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then there's these moments of like, and I'm going to give you, for instance, you're picked up by a car. It's a nice car. You go to, it's an event. It's an executive event for another big music person or company. And at the end of the night, it's like, oh, your car didn't come. So and so is going to give you a ride home. What?
Mm.
What? Why? Well, your car didn't come. And it might not be actually malicious in like initially. They may genuinely just be like, we found a ride, whichever ride they could for you. But that man happens to have his own desires. If you're a
Sure.
young girl and you're put into these positions that are very unscrupulous for any young woman. And when you're constantly told you're not pretty, you're fat, you're not good enough, you're controlled with what you eat, midnight phone calls, hey, you had pizza today, or you had cheese with your eggs, you're not allowed to eat cheese. Look at your body. You don't respect yourself. Take better care of yourself. So eating disorders arise. All of these things are happening, and then all of a sudden now someone is wanting you to pay them attention, and you're having to say no. And how many times do you have to say no? I can't tell you how many times I had to push men off of me, tell them no. There was no one in my corner. And I think that's where Brittany and I, when we're saying what we're saying it from a place of, when you feel like you're cattle and you're controlled and you just want everything to go smoothly, like just go in through this door, just go in through there, or just do what they say, because you don't want to deal with the fact that standing up for yourself becomes exhausting. And every day you try to stand up for yourself, but you're so tired, you're so hungry. And ultimately, it's like, well, if I stand up for myself, will I be able to support myself and my family and all of these things? That's what I meant. And if you're doing something for your position in life, and this goes on in any form of business. This is not just the music
Oh,
industry.
absolutely.
This is all forms. If you're having to sell something for something, you're in sales. What are you selling? And so, biblically, we know that there's a transfer that happens when anyone is getting an exchange of things. And so, you know, when you're selling yourself short, when you're having to sell your soul, when you're doing things that are really incorrect, and when your body is now up for grabs, this is where we really have to take a hard look at ourselves. And for me, I had to take a hard look at myself when I had two young fans in the audience of our show, one being about 4 or 5 years old, the other being about 6 or 7, looking up at me like I was a Spice Girl. The way I looked to the Spice Girls, they were looking up at the Pussycat Dolls like, wow. And when you see these two little faces, at that moment, I was going through an abortion. I'm losing my child in real time. I'm being told I was fat before this encounter, before I go on stage. I'm supposed to have super confidence. I'm losing my child. These two little girls are looking at me going, wow, mom, she's a pussycat doll. If you don't have a reverence in that moment of what you're doing matters, and that these young women are going to have this as their focal point of what beautiful is, what fame is, what success is, and it doesn't say, nothing on me in that moment said, caution, this is a lie. Nothing. Nothing was saying that. And I was a lie in that moment. There was nothing beautiful about me. I was tainted. I was destructive. I was destroyed. I was completely enchained and in bondage to the devil or the enemy or the realm of death, if you will, where I was living in my worst self. I was not living in my purpose. My purpose was to change the world, to use my voice, to empower young women. And now I was basically saying, well, you can be, sexually overly perverse, doing things that you're not happy about, low self esteem, which leads to promiscuity, ultimately, which leads to you having an abortion that you wish you never even encountered because it's painful beyond measure. Do you ever get over it? Never. Never get over it. It is something that you will live with for the rest of your life. And when it hits women at a later time, it is something that is so painful. So that was the aha for me to go, I have to leave this institution. And I wish the girls well. I never got to say goodbye to them, but I always prayed for them. I still prayed for the den mother from hell who put me through hell because she was the owner of the group. I still prayed for the executives in the music industry because forgive them. Forgive them if they didn't know what they were doing. I hope that they don't do it again to another young woman. And now when I use my voice for what does matter to me, it's really just about gaining people's awareness of, we can do better. There are a lot of good people in the music industry. There are a lot of good people in the entertainment industry. But if we don't hold ourselves to a higher accord and we don't have these discussions on a very big platform, we're letting it slowly just slide under the carpet. No big deal, but it is a big deal because you're influencing a generation and future generations. We influenced the Cardi B's. We influenced the Lady Gagas. Lady Gaga was influenced by the Pussycat Dolls. She said so herself. Ultimately, who's then led a generation to a whole nother form of influence. We are accountable. We are responsible. And if we don't do something to actually speak up and use our voices, then what does it matter?
Exactly. What you're describing is grooming. You were groomed to act a certain way, be a certain way, look a certain way, do this, or you're not going to have a place to stay because you don't have a ride to where you actually want to go. You were legitimately groomed. And at that point, I know some people are like, well, why can't you just walk away? And ultimately you did. But it's a lot harder than that. If you haven't ever dealt with anybody who has been groomed or who has been abused by a boyfriend or a husband or something, your whole mental state is in a totally different place. You're not thinking straight. You're not thinking like you normally would if you're in a normal, healthy mental frame of mind.
Right.
So I think that's something that's so important because we see it all over social media. I actually screenshot something when I was researching you, and it came up. It kind of randomly just popped up on my Instagram, and I think this is fairly recently because it was just posted. But Aubrey O'Day, she spoke out and she said that she was fired from the group Danity Kane, and her quote says, "I wasn't willing to do what was expected of me, not talent-wise, but in other areas." So this is something that is normalized in the industry. We hear a lot of people come out and talk about it, but a lot of times the people who come out and talk about it are kind of shamed, like, no, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Or we were already going to kick them out of the group, or we, they weren't going to get this acting gig, or, they're a nobody D-list actor, whatever. They're shamed when they do come out and speak out about it. But then you have people like, the Harvey Weinstein stuff, and then a lot of people start talking about it. So it is a very normal thing in Hollywood, which is very unfortunate because there are people with real talent who don't want to compromise their values, and they're like, you know what, forget it, this isn't worth it. And then we never end up getting to hear from them. But with the people that skyrocket to fame oftentimes are the people who are willing to compromise, and that's not anybody for our kids to look up to. And I so appreciate that in that moment you were able to look at those little girls and say, this isn't okay. I don't want them to look up to me in this way. I don't want them to look up to this lifestyle. And actually, in all the research that I did about you, I had no idea that you had an abortion. Is that something that you have shared before? Or
I have been, the Holy Spirit put on my heart to actually share my story about the abortions I've had, because there were multiple. Because after the first one, you don't think you've done anything wrong. It's been normalized. And what is a line until you've crossed it? You don't know what a line is. Once you've crossed that line, it's a very slippery slope to continue to cross those lines. This is why, and I knew when I was going to speak on it, and thank you for even setting up this question, because people really haven't asked me about this question correctly, and I want to be very firm on it because it is a situation for me that
is this the first time you're sharing about it?
actually probably yes, like on camera of talking about it, probably yeah, in a way where I can actually talk about the whole scenario of what's taken place in my life. I was at a college campus speaking with another very well-known influencer who speaks very publicly about pro-life. And by the way she spoke, it was really interesting. I hadn't at that time spoken about what I had gone through. I love her, she's a friend, but I knew she had never gone through it by the way she spoke. And I looked into the audience of young women in this college, and I could see the anger rising, and also the pain rising, because we're all mothers of dead children. If you have gone through an abortion, it is very painful. There is a lot of anger, there's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of lack of knowledge, there's a lot of regret, and nothing can make that go away other than God Himself when you lay it at His feet and ask for salvation on these issues. It's something that we need to talk about. It's something that has to get an overturning, because it is also the reason why there's a lack of respect between men and women in our culture, in our youth today. Because what you're showing men is that you don't value yourself or your seed or their seed. In return, they don't value us as women because we're willing to do these things to ourselves and to our children and to their seed as men. So it's created this cultural war between men and women, in my opinion. But I saw the young women in the audience, and I knew then I was going to have to speak about this issue, because when you've gone through it, there is an understanding that I understand their pain. Where when the anger rises, I can literally say, I understand. I do. I do understand. It's okay. It's okay to be angry. I'm not trying to take your rights away. I'm not trying to come against you, but I am trying to educate you and help you cross over where you understand now you need to lay it down and realize that you're forgiven. He's forgiven you. God has forgiven you. He knows the souls that are going to make it here. He knows the ones that aren't. Now you need to use your voice for those that still need to arrive. There are millions of babies that still need to come. You can still be a mom. You can still fall in love. You can still be valued. You can leave that at the foot of God. But I've had to walk through that because, unfortunately for fame, so my first abortion actually took place before the Pussycat Dolls, when I was 16, 17, 16, 17, and I was very young. So very young in the music industry, not receiving any guidance other than what I believed, right? And I was on the birth control pill at that time, so I figured, well, the pill didn't work, so, and it didn't. It actually didn't. So I didn't feel that that was murder, if you will. I didn't have any understanding of it. I didn't speak to my family about it. I didn't speak to anyone about it. I went and got it done, and I didn't need anyone's consent. Like that, I didn't need anyone's consent to have that abortion. That's been going on for some time. That you don't. 16 is of the age that you don't need consent, and I didn't. Um, when I then was in the Pussycat Dolls again, I became pregnant, and I was told to get rid of it. And at that point, because I had already gone through an abortion previously, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, right? And so again, gone through that. Then again, at 30 years old, I was raped because again of having no self-esteem, going through these forms of abuse in my earlier life, poor choices with someone I had been with in my past, trusted him, didn't think it was a big deal that he then forced himself upon me, became pregnant, wanted to keep the baby, and ultimately, due to the stress of all of it, there were complications, and that led to another abortion. So when I say I understand, I wholeheartedly understand. But this is why, from that last day of that whole synopsis of this train of trauma, I became very, very adamant about speaking about pro life. And a lot of people didn't understand why. You and all your audience now understand why, because this is actually the first time I've spoken publicly about each one. And each one I've had to pray about, each one I've had to talk to God about. It has been a very private journey in getting my well being mentally, emotionally, spiritually intact. But unfortunately, people don't want to talk to young women about it in the way that I feel we should start talking to young women about it. Instead of just demonizing it or putting all of these regulations, we have to come up with some kind of understanding of the damage, because it's very damaging. And when you've had one, you think you can keep having them. You don't think it's a big deal. And I genuinely think our culture has turned it into a form of it's turned it into a form of contraception. Like it's instead of using a condom, you can just have an abortion, just get rid of it. It's a clump of cells, have an abortion. And it's like, no, 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 no. This is very, very serious, and we do need to discuss it. But of course, because of the two I had in my earlier years, I do believe in the later years. And that's why when someone says, well, because of rape, I've gone through it all. I've gone through it all. And I will assure you, you will regret it your whole life. There will nothing. Even if I become a mother tomorrow and I'm happily married and all is well, I'm still going to regret the 3 children I did not have.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I feel so honored that you decided to open up today to me and to my audience, because I think this is a message that everybody needs to hear. And I'm 100% on board with you when you say that this is what people need to hear. And I truly believe, my situation was totally different, but I think it's women like you. And I have another friend named Toni McFadden. I don't know if you're familiar with her or not, but she had an abortion. It almost killed her, really. She hemorrhaged out afterward. And these are the stories that people need to hear, because there is regret and there is pain after it. And it's not something that just makes your problems go away. And yes, there is healing and there is forgiveness. And obviously, God's grace is bigger than any sin that you can ever commit. But this is something that the young girls don't know. They're told that it's like just ripping off a Band-Aid, or it's like getting your teeth cleaned, or clipping a toenail. Like, it's just this really easy thing. But there is an emotional, mental side of this that nobody talks about. So I think your story and stories like Tony's, they help people realize that there is this emotional side of it. There is pain that comes with it. And you're so right when you're talking about that audience that you were speaking to. You can see the anger in the eyes. You can see the hurt in the eyes, and that's actually something that I have told people. It helps me deal with the people who get aggressive on this issue, because you can see the hurt and you know where they're coming from. Oftentimes, even the guys, sometimes they've pressured a woman to have an abortion, or maybe they didn't have a say. And so they feel like the need to get defensive. And, this girl did it and they had no idea. And so they kind of try to tell themselves that it's okay and defend the act because they were unable to save their child in that instance. But you can see the hurt and the anger that they have.
Yeah.
Like, it's so obvious, and that they need healing and that they need God. But I think I hope that every pro-lifer listening to this can kind of take that when they're talking to people and realizing, if they're lashing out at me, it's obviously something deeper.
It is.
Is there something
going on with them? It is.
You're kind of hitting on that.
No, it's 100% something deeper. And, when you're talking about the men, it's so true. There are so many, when I spoke about, and the Holy Spirit put on my heart that day, and I didn't know, I genuinely, if anyone wants to check this out, you can actually see. So the day I spoke about it on Twitter, I couldn't go into the detail or depth that I did just now with you. It was, why I speak about life, right? It was just because, so the Holy Spirit put on my heart that day, to speak on this issue. And I argued with him. I was like, no, I don't want to. I'm not ready. I argued for like an hour before I finally gave up and just said, Father, I will do it. And I wrote this tweet and I posted it. And I started getting all of these messages back. And I assumed it was just because of the tweet. I didn't realize that there was any connection to anything other than the tweet. And what it was a really good friend, Amy Tarkanian. She reached out and said, Kaya, how did you know to write that tweet with, what's going on? And I said, what are you talking about? I don't understand what's going on. She said, well, Nancy Pelosi just signed that bill that's making it okay to basically kill outside of the womb. Like that went forward. That literally, I'm not kidding, 45 minutes after I did my post. And then I understood why it is so important when God puts it on our heart to speak on an issue. Because God knew that bill was coming. I didn't. I had no idea that bill was coming that day. I had no idea that they were going to push it forward. I did not know. And that was also the same day they lit up the Empire State Building pink. And so because of it. And the amount of men, I received thousands of messages from men because I brought up men in that tweet. I said, men deal with this private pain as well, and nobody's discussing it, and we really need to tackle this issue. The amount of men that reached out to me privately and publicly and said, I just want to say thank you. I paid for an abortion. They were all confessing, and they just needed someone to say it's okay, don't worry, God loves you. And that was my response. It's okay, God forgives you, you will meet your child one day, let it go now. Like, let that pain go. Like, you have to let it go. It is very, very serious and very real. It's not healthcare. It makes you the parent of a dead child, and that pain is very real. To try and negate it or act like it doesn't matter is only going to add more salt onto a wound that is not healing correctly. It's very real. It will forever be a stain on you. You'll feel it forever. And but the flip note on that post was the amount of women that contacted me that were in the port, like in that moment, deciding on whether or not they were going to keep their baby. Like, they were going through the decision of, I'm thinking about having an abortion. And what's really cool is when we share is there's been multiple women who have actually kept their baby, and now they've sent me their photos of the babies and things through the years that just make my heart smile, because you know that post, even though it was really hard for me, someone received something from it. And so that's why it's important for us to share our stories, even if it's hard for us to share. It's not pleasant. It doesn't make me look any better of a human being, but it is part of my testimony, which is why I care so much about, when I speak about the Lord, when I'm speaking about pro life, when I'm speaking about the things that matter to me, it's because I can speak on it because I went through it. If you've never gone through something, it's really hard to speak on an issue, but it might be something you're compassionate for or you're passionate about. Um, but men, unfortunately, there needs to be more men that step up, that speak on this, because it's a very, very serious issue. Very.
Absolutely. And it's their child too. And I think that's something that people need to realize. You know, they say no uterus, no opinion, but men very much do get an opinion, and they should. And it is their job. I mean, obviously we can go to that people shouldn't be sleeping around, period. That's why God has the creation of man and woman and marriage and family, and he did that intentionally. But ultimately, men need to step up in a lot of ways, and women too. It's on both sides of the aisle. I'm very interested to hear your opinion on Hollywood as a whole when it comes to this issue of abortion. Obviously, I don't want you to say any names, but is this just like a super common thing that's happening all the time when it comes to actors or I suppose actresses and musicians? Because you were told to do that. Is just that's how it goes in Hollywood?
Um, I would think that it's probably very common, only because, you know, look look at all of the celebrities we know and see how many are married with children. And I'm not saying that some have just chosen not to, then some may not have been able to. Every circumstance is different. Jennifer Aniston recently came out and said she tried to get pregnant. She couldn't. You know, so to kind of diminish what she was going through, nobody knew what she was going through. Everyone just assumed she didn't want kids. She wanted them. She couldn't have them. That's horrible position to be in as a woman and go through that kind of pain. So I can't say that it's everyone's stance or everyone goes through it, but I will say it was mine. I do think that at that time culturally it was very common to push women into that. Currently, I don't know if we're there. Currently, I see that a lot of the Kardashians are having babies. There's a lot of people in the industry that are having children. It's becoming more of something that the walls are being torn down. And that's a good day when we're starting to see that there's a shift, that Gwen Stefani is becoming a mom, and you see how excited she is for her kids. And, all of the different celebrities are starting to show their children more. It's starting to become something that is not like quiet. But as the pop culture went, at the time where I was going through what I went through, it's the same time that when Britney Spears got pregnant, they didn't want her to get pregnant. If you remember those kinds of tabloids, they made fun of her marriage. They tried to, make fun of her while she was pregnant. They really made it a big deal. And it was almost like, no, the sex symbol can't get pregnant. It became this thing where they gave her a hard time. They definitely gave Shakira a hard time. They definitely gave Pink a hard time. There were certain people at that time that, no, we don't want to see you pregnant. Um, and even when Gwen got pregnant, it was very quiet. She remained very behind the scenes with it, which probably kept her a little safer. Um, but yeah, it was definitely something. I would say that, if you were seen as if you wanted to keep your job, and I know of some other girls with different groups, and I can't speak on their pain, but I know of some other women who have had to go through the exact same thing. And in fact, they were fired when they chose not to have an abortion.
Goodness
So,
gracious. It seems like it's deeply seated, but I know there's a lot of demonic stuff that goes on in Hollywood as a whole. And I'm glad you brought up the Kardashians. Interestingly enough, I know that I advocate for marriage and children to be born into a marriage. I obviously learned the hard way and had a child out of wedlock when I was 20 years old, and so I kind of know, I have walked those shoes and know why God created man and woman in marriage as an institution, and the logical sense that it makes, because now I have to co-parent. I'm married, not to my son's father, but I understand co-parenting, and it's difficult, it's hard, and that my son deserves both mom and dad in the same household.
right.
Give that to
Right.
him. But when I remember when Kylie got pregnant, well, I think she was 20, 21 years old, something like that. The first time she got pregnant, and I think she's got two, right? I mean, I pay attention a little bit, but I am not like super in the know on the
Yeah,
Kardashians.
I get it.
But people were kind of dogging on her about having a baby so young, and while obviously she should have waited till she got married, I was kind of like, look at what she's doing though. She's choosing life. Can we acknowledge that she chose life for her child despite these circumstances? It would have been much easier for her to go and have an abortion and nobody would have ever known about it. And then she
Exactly.
could continue to be Kylie Jenner, work on her brand, work on her career, and become the billionaire that she is. But she
Exactly.
decided to choose life for her child. And as somebody who got pregnant at 20 and had my son at 20 years old, I I had so much respect in that moment. It feels weird saying I had respect for a Kardashian or a Jenner. I suppose she's a Jenner. But I did. I was like, good for her. Good for her for choosing life despite what would have been easiest, despite what other people were probably telling her to do. And she wanted to be a mother. And she's kind of showing other people, while Planned Parenthood is over here saying, abortion, abortion, abortion. We have people like the Kardashians, though they may not be having children in the right way, they are showing the value of life, and they are choosing life for the children that they have become pregnant with. And I think that is a really cool thing, that's kind of becoming the norm of, yeah, we're going to have our babies. And that young people who look up to them as role models are seeing that. Not that I think they're the greatest role models, but, that's a really cool thing to see, because you don't always see it, and we're not always going to hear about the abortions. That we have the Busy Phillips who scream it, and I had an abortion and I love it, and we have those kinds of people. But then we have these people who choose life, and it's like, look, I'm going to be a billionaire mogul, and I'm going to do motherhood at the same time. Watch me do it. And I
Yeah,
think that's really cool.
I think it's cool when we see someone choose life every day of the week. So I think that no matter what I may think of individuals and what they're going through, and that's the thing is, worry about the log in our own eye, right? That's what the Lord says. And definitely there's been a lot of controversy about that family, especially with Balenciaga, things that were going on, and all of the different
Always.
comments about a lot, right? It's not our place to discuss or say things about other people. It definitely is our place to pray for people that we don't understand or whatever they might be walking through. I pray for people that I don't like all the time, because that's where the reward comes in, is praying for those that clearly something's off. And it also helps you reckon with maybe something that might be within yourself that you recognize that's similar to them, where there's a reason why you may not like them, is because there's a lot more similar things going on there than we reckon with or realize, like, whoa, there's some similarity. But definitely the fact that you have people that are now in this industry choosing life over talking about an abortion, I think that's a wonderful thing. And
Yeah.
it's something that more youth should see, because it shows you that you can do it. Had I had the opportunity of even just one person saying, you can do it, and helping me figure that out. I didn't know there were organizations that could have helped me. I certainly didn't know that I could have done both. I was so panicked in all situations that it was just, and the second situation, I actually hemorrhaged and was very ill. I became very ill. So, as well as the third, very ill. So that's the thing, is with the first one, there may have been no complication, but by the time that I'm 19 or 29, almost 30 years old, having another major complication.
Mhm.
This is why now I'm completely single. I'm not having any kind of relationship with anyone. I was celibate because I don't want to use birth control that I know harms my body. I don't want to put myself in another situation where I've not accepted the fruit from heaven, which is children. Children are a blessing from God. You are so blessed to have that blessing. And I hope to one day to be able to be a mom. I hope to be a wife, and to be able to share what I do believe is the greatest gift, and ultimately the greatest job you'll ever have on this planet as a woman is to be a mother.
This this I had a whole list of questions for you, and this whole podcast took like a totally different turn than I thought it would, but I'm so glad that it did because I think your story is one that needs to be told, and I feel very grateful that you opened up to us and that people now get to hear your story and learn from you and kind of know who Kaya is. I know you said your real name's Crystal. Do people call you Kaya now or Crystal? What do your friends call you?
It's really interesting. Some of my friends call me Crystal, and I answer because it's my birth name. I mean, I really love my birth name. My birth name is very Hebraic. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, my real last name is Nariah, which is literally a little town in Israel. And I've never been. But it's like it's in the Bible, Baruch Nariah, and I've always wanted to go as Crystal Nariah because that's my name. But it was something that was kind of stripped from me with the music industry and being held to a recording contract. So Kaya Jones was born. I like Kaya, and I think I've stuck with Kaya because everyone knows it. Also, in the Hebrew, I think it's really cool that you don't say K, but you say Haya. So the Haya is like the second highest realm, which is the closest to God. So I think that's pretty cool. And all my Hebrew friends, they go, "Yeah, you have the Haya," and like I'm like, "Yeah,
No.
like Lahaim, life." So I definitely think that that's cool about the Kaya, and maybe God secretly gave me Kaya to hide me in some way, so that when He was ready to show who I was, it made sense. And He's using the Hebrew and God and all of His wonderful works to share that message. But I answer to both, but I love my real name because it's my birth name. I love it. I love both. I love whatever anyone wants to call me. It's okay.
Okay, so I'll go back and forth, or maybe I'll figure out what I call you in real life. But I'm really grateful for the way this podcast turned out. And I think it's so powerful that you were able to walk away from an industry that was leading you down the wrong path. And that you even spoke out about Jesus and your faith. And you said something that one of the last things that I had written down that I definitely want to touch on was that you were talking about your faith in Jesus and that there was an executive who told you, you can't walk that back. The fact that you said this publicly, you can't take that back. And to me, I'm like, if she said it, she doesn't want to take it back. Like,
I know, but isn't that
hello?
so frightening?
That's wild. It's wild. I guess like there's some people who talk about it, but I never realized how taboo it was to bring
It
it
was
up.
like I remember that call, and I was so shocked because literally they said, "I hope you know you can't walk that back," and
Yeah.
I was like, and I think I was just so appalled, and I remember just being like, and I said that, I said, "I'm not walking anything back. I'm not walking back God. I'm not walking back Jesus. I love Him so much." And the fact that, like, you're threatening me, because this feels like you're threatening me, it's like, I'm not threatening you. I'm just telling you the reality. You're not going to be able to walk this back. And I'm like, well, I don't know anyone who would ever want to walk back once you've received Jesus. Like, I'm going to just tell you quite honestly, He saved my life. Like, He's accepted me broken and all. He accepted me with the abortions I had. He accepted me with the poor mistakes I made in my life. He accepted me with the drug abuse. He accepted me with the anxiety, the depression, the eating disorders, all of those things. He accepted me. He cloaked me. He loved me. He forgave me of my sins. He forgave me of my wickedness and said, "I'm the door. Now you get to walk through, and you get to do this all over the right way, and you're accepted and you're loved, and you will make it." And so, for all the people out there, if you really don't think that you're loved or you're appreciated or you're valued or you're worthy, God said that you are, and He laid His life down for you. So don't let anyone push you around. Definitely don't let anyone make you think that walking something back, you don't walk back Jesus. You grab on and you hang on and you say, "Let's go." You never walk back. because that's where I do feel like where we fall is where we allow the wickedness of this world to try and influence us, which is what's happened, right? We've taken the book of the Bible, we've taken Jesus, and we've tried to manipulate it to the ways of man. And that's the really what's so sad is like, well, like, well, we can, you can masturbate or you can have abortions or you can do these things. We're manipulating the context of where these things say clearly you cannot. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say that you can do all these things and then just because you say, oh, well, Father, forgive me. No, if you know better, we do better. And so that book, the Bible, the Torah, is meant to transform your life. And it was made to transform man, not to bend to the will of man. So I definitely, when that executive said that, that was frightening. But definitely, I would never want to walk back my salvation. I'm so grateful for it.
Of course. I end every podcast episode with one last question. It's the same question every single time. Obviously, speak out is the name of the show, but speaking out can be a difficult thing to do. As you know, like being in Hollywood, you're kind of silenced, and topics like the issue of abortion or our faith can sometimes be controversial, especially in today's day and age. If you could give the listeners one piece of advice to encourage them to speak out, what would that be?
Be fearless and be bold.
Amen.
Be bold. Yeah, be bold, because God is with you. And even though it may feel scary, He's with you. So if He tells you to pray for someone, pray for them. If He tells you to stand up for what's right, do it. If He tells you to walk away from a situation like I have multiple times, do it. If you're sitting in that abortion clinic and you feel Him say, get up, get up. Yeah. Don't listen to what people think. Listen to God and be bold because He's holding your hand.
Amen. Kaya, where can everybody find you? Tell us your social media so they can all go follow you.
At Kaya Jones, Kaya Jones on Instagram, on Twitter, and it's Kaya's Music on TikTok and Kaya's Music on so KAYASMUSIC on Facebook. Yeah.
Wonderful. And what's next for Kaya?
What's next for Kaya is we're launching KayaJones.com. We have new music. We have Go Through the Father to Get to Me, which is going to be on a new film that's coming out next year, which basically means that if you love the Lord, then whoever is your spouse has to go through the Father to get to you because you're worthy of someone who understands and is equally yoked. We have Devil is a Liar, which is another song that's coming out next year. Royal, another one. We've just been writing and recording the album, and just everything is for God. So working a lot on new music, ministry, what my ministry is going to look like for Him, and my foundation, my structure, and finishing up Cooper Bible College, which has been a lot.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to seeing what you have coming out next year.
Thank you.